All right. Hey, folks. Sunny Guerra here with Campaigns and Elections. Welcome to today's webinar sponsored by Prompt.io. This is a masterclass, expert tips for texting campaigns. And I just want to say a quick thank you to Prompt.io for sponsoring today's webinar. Prompt.io is a robust texting platform for political organizations, advocacy groups, nonprofits, and union users. They service customers via fully registered 10DLC, toll-free, and short code. We'll have a formal Q&A session towards the end of the webinar, but please use the questions function to the right of your screen in the bottom throughout the session, and we'll do our best to get everyone's questions answered at the very end. Lloyd Cotler, principal at Banter Messaging, will be leading today's webinar. Lloyd, you can take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Sunny. It's nice to meet everybody. I'm super excited to talk to you about how to do texting well. So let me go ahead and start my presentation. All right, awesome. So like Sunny said, this is a masterclass, so expert tips for your texting campaigns. So I'm going to start with kind of like a baseline, like assuming a baseline knowledge for folks, some vocabulary, stuff like that. If you don't understand anything I'm saying or stuff sounds unfamiliar, definitely feel free to drop it in the chat. And like Sunny said, we'll have a QA at the end of the presentation. So we'll do a little intro, just very quick about myself, so you kind of believe that I know what I'm talking about here, and then talk about some of the things that I think make really successful texting campaigns: segmentation and personalization, unsiloing, defining the right metrics and success, some ways you can test better, and best practices. So definitely feel free to start collecting your thoughts, dump stuff in the chat window, and I'm excited to answer some really smart questions later at the end. So just again, wanted to share a little bit about myself. I started doing digital marketing about 13 years ago in the immigrant and refugee rights community, knowing that those folks were not typically people who sat at a desk all day, right? They were folks who didn't necessarily have home internet. They didn't necessarily talk to us like or other supporters for other causes did. So texting became a really important tool in the toolkit there. And then I just kind of realized after that, like, wow, everybody does this, right? Everybody texts. It's a medium that our supporters are like really familiar with in their own personal life. And so how do we use that to build that relationship, right? Like have that same feeling when you get a text from an organization or a candidate that you care about as you do when like your friend or somebody that you haven't heard from in a while texts you. So that was really important to me to kind of think about and explore, and I was able to do that in all of these other positions that you can see. Then I started Banter in 2019 to kind of do this, on my own. So very exciting, and I also like to share a photo of my dog, who is much more handsome than I am, so he definitely gets the prime real estate. All right, so I want to start with the thought that SMS is a two-way medium. So the sooner and the more you lean into that, the more successful you'll be, right? Texting is kind of the only tool in your toolkit that is two-way, that is a way for people to speak directly back to you in that private channel, right? Folks can comment on your Instagram or comment on your Facebook or, reply to like an info at email, stuff like that. But it's just not the same, and people really know it, right? Social media is public. There's not like a private, feature to that other than DMing. Email is just not, a relationship, right? Every email you send is like a brand new communication with those folks. There's no chat history. There's no sense of a long-term relationship. SMS is the kind of one tool that you have that is that two-way medium. So the more you lean into that, the more you think about the way people already use their phones, the more successful you're going to be. So to me, personalization, segmentation, and engagement are those three keys that are going to really bring up your game. So starting, a couple of other quick things to think about when you're writing and when you're doing texting and thinking about your strategy. You want to be punchy, right? You're not writing for email. You're not writing social copy. You're not necessarily writing for the lowest common denominator, right? Social copy has to be really broad. Email copy, is very long, right? So you want to think about, I am writing for a text. What does a text sound like? You want to be real, right? You want to have a real theory of change in your messages. You want to think about, who is this person sending the text to your supporters or to your voters or to your donors? And what does this conversation do to advance, that goal? You want to be valuable. So a lot of people still pay per text message. It's kind of a really often overlooked fact. So be valuable, right? Why does somebody want to subscribe to your texts? What are you offering them either that they don't get in other media or that they don't get from your own other channels, right? If your texts are just the same as your Twitter feed, what are you offering people? Why would somebody sign up and potentially pay for those texts if they could just, go to Twitter and see the same exact content, right? So you want to think about like what's valuable to people. And then you want to be respectful, right? This, I think, is kind of one of the most important. Texts are really intimate. Like I say, if you think about who you're texting with, in your personal life, it's your friends, it's your family, it's people that are important to you. So, do things that people's friends and family do to them, right? Apologize when you make a mistake, update your data, segment well, actually talk to people like they're people. It's really important to be respectful. So first, personalization is really, an important part of this, right? Like I said, it has to be an experience that people want, right? People want to get these texts. They want to talk to a person. Nobody, goes out of their way to like talk to a robot. And so you want to think about like, great, what does that mean? What does personalization mean? People think it means like, did you mail merge my name into this message, right? So that it's me and I know that this message is for me. That is sure one part of it, but personalization really means like, what does this person who is sending the text sound like, right? How do we convey the voice of the person that we are sending from? How do we make this relationship into something that like we're building? So you want to think about a consistent, personable voice, right? You all probably receive messages or maybe even send messages that are just, nebulously like from an organization or that don't really have, a person's point of view. But you want to think about like, people can't build relationships if there's no, person on the other end, right? It's really hard to build a relationship with an organization writ large compared to a person who works at that organization, right? Or a person who does something at that organization that you care about or at that campaign that you care about. You don't want to sound too formal. People I think make this mistake where they think about like, well, this is like a communication that goes out into the world and it has to sound, like our emails or like our press releases or, written by committee, that kind of stuff. But really, you want to be authentic. You want to think about, again, who is the person sending this message? What do they sound like? And how can I get their, personality across there? And so the more human you are, it's just easier to build and deepen those connections, right? So again, I think about that to like your own life, right? Do you have a deep personal relationship with the text message that American Express sends you every month with your bill? Like probably not, right? But something like BarkBox, right? Like there's always a person who is talking to me and they always tell me about their dog and they build that connection with me. And that's a really different experience, right? It's something that really builds that brand loyalty and something that really makes me think about like, this as a person I can talk to about my problems or about my thoughts or about my feelings. And that's really important for that long-term connection. So kind of this is a great example of that difference between like, do I have a voice? Am I talking to a person? Am I just, talking to a thing? Right. So these are two messages that were sent out like pretty close after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. And you can kind of just see the difference. And I don't want to necessarily get into like all of the details of the messages or, what makes one message more effective than another, stuff like that. I just want to think about like in this case, the difference on something that's like a very, very personal issue, having that real person who I can connect to, having that person that makes this like a stake that I can, relate with. That's very different than this is what this organization is doing writ large, or this is something that is like more of a community feel. And again, your merits on like different issues and stuff like that. But like the difference just is like I can now, like, if I am a person who is going through something like this, I am much more likely to reply to the one on the right? I'm much more likely to share my own story with even the illusion of another person than just, this organization writ large. And this is a moment where, you want to give people space to share those feelings, right? It's really important for your supporters to feel like you are supporting them back, right? This is a moment for everybody. So I always make people answer this question when I talk to them, right? Why are people signing up for your texts? What are you doing to get them that they're excited about this? Or what are they getting out of this that, like I said, they don't get on Twitter and they don't get in other media? So, if you just tell people, sign up for texts from us, right? The question they ask is why, right? What am I getting out of this? What is the point? So, you can use a lot of different kind of tactics to answer this question. You can say like, oh, you're getting texts from me because you're getting discounts, or you're getting inside information, or you're getting, behind the scenes stuff, right? Or just you're one of our biggest supporters, right? Here's like a level up in your activism, or here's the way that you can become evangelists for what we're talking about, stuff like that. Here's how you can take action in your own community. So, what are people doing? And truly the easiest answer is they are building a relationship, right? They are growing that relationship that they have with you, the person that's sending the texts. That should be why people are signing up, right? It's somebody that shares their enthusiasm, that shares their, passion for change. And that's what they are, signing up for, right? All that other stuff, the fundraising messages, the, voting messages, all that kind of stuff, right, is, yes, ideally your goal, right, what you are doing, but that's not a reason why people are signing up, right? They don't care that you want to send them fundraising messages, right? So you have to give them what they are looking for, and then you're also going to get out of it what you're looking for. So segmentation, right, is also a really key portion to a successful campaign, right? If you think about it, like I said, texting is that very unique medium where you are having a one-on-one conversation. It is not the lowest common denominator kind of Facebook stuff. It's not the, is this going to get me retweets kind of thing, right? It is, I can have very specific conversations with very specific people because I know a lot about them, right? Ideally, they are telling me things, right? We're having that relationship and they are sharing things, user reported stuff. But also I have other data from other places, right? If you're doing your CRM integration, things that they've bought before, how they voted previously, or specific issues they care about, stuff like that. So you really want to think about different kind of experiences for different kind of supporters. And that is going to, again, reap dividends later, right? Because it's building that relationship. I know this person knows this about me. I know they care it, right? Or they care about it with me, and not, that they're sending me all these messages that don't make any sense to me, right? Or have anything to do with why I support an organization or a candidate or what I'm doing. So thinking about like really different segments, really different experiences entirely for people, just kind of a very quick example that I worked on with the National Education Association for Teacher Appreciation Week. We had entirely different experiences for educators, for parents, for students, for educators who were parents, right? All of these people can have multiple identities, and we want to really think about like, what is the best way to talk to them in this, time about what's going on. We don't want to ask educators to send thank you messages to themselves, right? That's something we only want to ask of parents and students. We don't want to send, parents all these messages of thanks for educators because they're not educated, right? They educate their own child, potentially, right? But like, they are not educators in like that broad sense. So we really just want to think about those entirely different experiences. And then, like I said, you can see it as the results. We sent, potentially 5-6 messages in 1 week to some of these people and had less than a 1% opt-out rate. So, you're giving people what they're looking for. You are giving them only what applies to them. You're not going to see those opt-outs from sending so many messages. And sending a lot of messages is really important, again, because that's what a real person does. That's how you build a relationship, is like consistently talking to people, having a lot of, interaction with them. 40% of the participants were all new signups, right? So that meant that we were doing a really good job of talking to people about things that were important to them. And then they shared that with other educators or they shared that with other parents as great ways to get involved. So, just thinking about those entirely different experiences, you can have a really broad funnel at the top and then, segment people out and say, great, these messages apply to you. These keywords are for you, that kind of stuff. So I always encourage people to think about like, who are your audiences, right? You maybe aren't doing education. You don't have that kind of split between educators, parents, et cetera, et cetera. But you have lots of other data, right? Or you have lots of other segments. And I always encourage people to think about like, what do you know about people reliably? And then how can you use that to have different experiences and personalize stuff? So, maybe you are working on like gun violence prevention, right? You don't have necessarily educators, parents, students as segments, but maybe you have moms and maybe you have hunters and sportsmen, right? And maybe you have law enforcement, right? And those are very different segments that you are talking to very differently about things. So you want to think about those as, potential segments. You might be working on refugees, right? And again, refugees have like wildly different support bases. You might be talking to like very religious, Christians and Catholics. You might be talking to very religious Muslims. You might be talking to, just like secular folks who are interested in that kind of stuff. You might be talking about people who are really interested in what's going on in Ukraine right now and people who are really only interested in, Afghanistan. So you want to think about those segments. You want to make sure you're talking to those people in a unique way. It doesn't mean that you can only talk to people who are interested in Ukraine about Ukraine, right? You want to educate them on what's going on in Afghanistan too. That's great. But it means you start with knowing that they care about Ukraine. How do we tie that into this? Or how do we, bring it over? So all of these other examples, right? You maybe have different experiences for donors, non-donors, and recurring donors, right? Or maybe you don't want to just suppress all of your like maxed donors, right? You want to still send them messages. You still want to engage with them. You don't want to say like, great, I've got the maximum amount of money from you. I don't care about you anymore. But you don't want to ask them for any more money. You don't want to send them more fundraisers. So, what kind of stuff are you doing for those different audiences? Another one I like to call out here is just like other channel activity. So thinking about like, where did some of these people sign up from? If you are doing, like really big, like potentially short code programs, you're having different keywords in different channels. You maybe want to know all of the people that, came to you from Twitter or came to you from a particular influencer or who came to you from your email program. And all of that stuff is going to help you, decide where resources go, or was this a successful partnership, or, do we continue to grow this particular program, stuff like that. So I really encourage folks to think about like, what are the segments you have at your disposal, or what segments do you want to build? What do you want to know about your folks, right? And then ask them, right? It's really easy to ask them. Asking questions of each other is like one of the main ways we build relationships with, actual human beings. So next is about unsiloing your operation, right? And this kind of happens when texting lives in the digital department, let's say, right? And then so it is just a tool of the digital department to do the things that the digital department is responsible for, right? Fundraising, voter engagement, that kind of stuff. But really, texting can spread throughout your whole organization. It is comparatively really cheap to a lot of your other channels and really effective. So, thinking about where can text like lift some other boats, right? How can we use it as a tide to lift some other boats here? So thinking about like, are you doing direct mail? Can you do a primer message to your direct mail audience and say, hey, look out for this, direct mail piece that we're sending you, right? Don't ignore this mail. It's really important. Or maybe you're doing a chaser. Hey, did you see this? Did you get a chance to give? Are you doing telemarketing? Are you doing field stuff, right? You can really spread texting through all of these channels at like a much lower cost and have really big results, right? If you are able to boost your direct mail response rate by like 1%, that's costing you what, 6 cents a text message? That's huge because your direct mail gifts on average are probably very high, right? If you're doing a strong direct mail program. So for, 6 cents a person, if you're able to get another $1,080 gifts, right? That's really important. I use this press example a lot. People are kind of I think people look at the press example and they say, how do we do that? Like I said earlier, texting is a one-on-one channel. I don't know what other texts people are getting. I don't know what experiences those folks are having, right? So when I was at Hillary for America, one thing we used to do, I would take the press list from the comms department, run it through our program and see, great, these 50 reporters are getting texts from us, right? They're already signed up, so they're subscribed. Now I segment them out and I send them messages that only they are getting, right? But they think that the whole list is getting, they think is going really wide. So what is the campaign trying to push, right? What things are we trying to get out in the press, or what kind of things are we pushing back on, that kind of stuff. So taking some of those other channels, spreading it out through the organization, and now all of a sudden, right, the comms department sees how valuable this is, right? Or they see like, you did this great thing for them. They're more willing now to like help you, make sure that the keywords are in all the speeches, or make sure that it's on when folks are, giving big presentations, stuff like that. So thinking about it, you want to make sure all these other channels are also helping you grow the list, but you can use them for really creative tactics. Okay. Sorry, one second. So defining success, right? I think that it's really important to think about like, what are we actually looking for, right? How do we say that this worked or not? To me is very different, I think, than what traditionally people think about. Like, did this text make money, right? Did we send this out? Did it raise money for us? Did it turn voters out? Stuff like that. It's really hard to measure, some of the voting stuff. But particularly on fundraising, I find that people are very short-sighted and think about, this text I send costs this much money to send out. It has to make this much money back. But I find that to be very short-sighted. It means then that every message you send has to be a fundraising message. You can't do any of the engagement stuff. You can't think about like, what are those other ways people can get involved? It also really discourages you from having long conversations with people if the cost per conversation is going up. So you want to think about then like, what are actually these metrics that matter? What says our text program is doing good, not just our fundraising program is doing good? So, to me, something like average gift size, right? Do SMS subscribers give more than email-only subscribers? Are they giving it in other channels? To me, that doesn't matter, right? If I can show that text subscribers give substantially more than email-only subscribers, even if they're giving by email, then to me, that's a win, right? It means that texts are doing something to increase the relationship, to deepen the relationship with those folks, and they're giving more. It doesn't matter what channel they're giving on, as long as the text is having the effect of making them more invested in what we're doing. I'll say that with like the small caveat of, you don't want to drive people to your ads, because your ads cost substantially more. But so are your people on text, even if they're giving in email or on social, stuff like that, are they giving more than those other channel only subscribers? Number of gifts, right? Are they giving, again, more often than those other channel only, right? It means that they're seeing more of our messages, that our texts are potentially sending people back to email to give more there, or just that like the immediate nature of the text means that they're giving more often. Subscription length, I think, is probably the most important metric. How long are people staying on your list, right? How long do they care about what you have to say? Is a really great proxy for like, are these messages good? Am I overwhelming people by only asking them for money? Are they getting something out of this, right? That relationship, that length of that relationship is really important to measure. If your people only stay on the list for like a month on average before signing up, I mean, your churn rate obviously is very big, but it means that like you aren't developing those relationships. It means you have to ask for a lot of money up front, because you're going to lose those people in 31 days. If people stay on the list, a year, 2 years, 3 years, right? It means that you can really build that relationship over the long term. You can think about like, cool, this message I'm sending right now is just engagement. It's not making any money, but those people down the line have that deeper relationship, are giving more often. So subscription length, I find really important. And then offline behavior, like I said, you don't want to ignore what people are doing in other channels. So you want to think about like, is texting driving people to in-person events? Is texting people driving people to voting? Is texting driving people to phone banking? That kind of stuff. And how are we measuring that? What does that look like for us? Are texts, helping there? And so, again, I think yes, if you're doing it right, if you're showing people, I am this person, I'm in charge of phone banking, I need your help, this is how easy it is, right? You can really convert people that you've built that long-term relationship. They don't feel like you're just, lying to them. A stat that I use all the time that is astounding when I was at Hillary for America, the number one indicator of likelihood to take offline action was SMS subscription. It was more predictive of offline behavior than if you had previously attended another offline event. So that's like really stunning, right? That like we could count on you more to show up for an event if you got a text about it from us than if you had previously showed up to an offline event. For those of us who do like online to offline stuff, like that's a really, really incredible stat. It means that your digital program is like turning out real human beings who live in the places that you need them to vote in, that kind of stuff. And that's a really, really important metric to think about. So, I think when you don't do that, you get stuff like this. And this is like the worst thing that can happen, I think, when you answer somebody like this. This is absolutely like the opposite of a relationship. I am telling a person here, like, I am just treating you like an ATM. You don't want to do this, right? Like, this is, I'm never going to respond to another message from this person, right? So you want to think about like those long-term metrics. If that is built into like your culture, if that's built into all of your reporting, you don't get things like this. If your focus is only on this text needs to make money, I spent this much money on this texting, for today, it has to, have this whatever ROI, then you get in this poisonous mindset that trickles all the way down to the people having these conversations, right? They're going to ignore people who ask questions about in-person events, right? Because that's not making them money. It's costing them more money to answer people. You don't ever want to be in a position where you discourage your supporters from talking to you, or where you discourage your volunteers from talking to your supporters, even if it's not about the thing that you're texting them about, right? You want to think about texting as this is just an open-ended channel. And if you have a question, if you have something, you can talk to us about it the same way we can start a conversation with you about it. If your mindset is only, does this make money? You get stuff like this, it trickles all the way down. Your supporters realize like, there's no value in this relationship. It's not a relationship. So testing and experimentation, I think, is really fun and is a place where you can see a lot of great results. Too often, I think people get stuck in the weeds and think about like tests that maybe are carried over from email or stuff that they think about in other channels. But testing in SMS is really unique because, like I said, SMS is a unique channel. So you want to think about testing tactics and behavior, not copy, right? I always say to people, if you are testing the difference between make a gift and rush a gift, right, you are wasting a testing opportunity. In a 160 character message, changing 4 of those characters, there's not enough there to make a valid test, right? You might see, slight differences or whatever, but it's not enough to build and to iterate on. Instead, think about testing tactics, right? Think about testing those direct mail primers or a primer, a chaser, a sandwich test, stuff like that. Think about testing online to offline behavior. All of those things are much more important than make a gift versus rush a gift, donate versus give, that kind of stuff. Those just don't matter as much. You want to really think about multi-channel testing. So like I said, SMS subscribers are likely to be in other places as well, right? They had to hear about you from somewhere to sign up for your SMS list. So think about, how do we drive SMS supporters back to our email for things that are very long, right? If we have like big long explainers, or if we have stuff that just requires a lot of text, right? Maybe we send them back to email. Think about direct mail, think about telemarketing, all of those things that like cost you substantially more money per item, per piece. You can use SMS to really multiply. Frequency testing is the most important test you can run. So frequency testing will help you figure out how many messages you can send before, you know, your people start either trailing off in terms of donations, replies, unsubscribes, that kind of stuff. It'll also help you send as many up until that point as possible, right? SMS has that really high rate of return. If you're only sending one text every month, you're leaving a ton of money on the table. You're leaving a ton of interactions on the table, right? So you want to find, through frequency testing, what is that sweet spot? How many messages should I send to build that relationship up to what I want it to? Not more than that, ideally not less than that either. You know, think about, again, in your own personal life, if you only hear from somebody that, you know, when they need a ride to the airport, right? Like, you very quickly start to figure out their game. You don't really respond as much. So you want to have those consistent interactions. Frequency testing will help you figure that out. Don't bother testing time of day, day of week, that kind of stuff, right? I've had plenty of clients who spend way too much time, like, oh, if we send it on Tuesday instead of Thursday, it's this, you know, difference, whatever. Most texts are read within 3 minutes of being received. So send it when it's relevant, right? Send it when it is matters to people now. If it's breaking news, send it immediately. Don't wait till, you know, Wednesday because your test says this. You want people to, again, feel like these texts are valuable. If it is something that's breaking news, if it's through the lens of your organization, right? I would rather hear from an organization I care about working on something than get like a CNN breaking news, right? A CNN breaking news something doesn't tell me how to act, doesn't tell me what to do with this information. It just gives me information. So it's more important to send things in the moment, send them when they're relevant, than to think about like, oh, well, we have to send it at 11 a.m., right? I will say the only caveat to this is if you have some of those very unique populations, right? If you are targeting students, don't send to them when they're supposed to be in school, right? If you are targeting teachers, you know, don't send them during times where they're supposed to be teaching. Stuff like that, right? So you want to think about those very particular cases. But for the most part, it does not matter if you send something on Monday versus Thursday. If it's relevant on Monday, send it on Monday. And then challenge your assumptions. SMS, again, like I said, is really one of the only channels where you are going to get useful, substantial, qualitative feedback. Your, you know, info at reply email box is probably a nightmare, right? The kind of people that take the time to write back like a long email to you are generally not complimenting you. So you're not getting that full, you know, that full feedback. Twitter, Instagram, right, are like cesspools, right? The comments are not helpful. You don't know if that's actually the audience that you're trying to reach. There's not a lot learned, right, in reading the comments there. There is a lot learned in reading the replies to texts you are sending. You are going to get a lot of really valuable information from, you know, people who are your supporters, right? They signed up for your texts in the first place, so they care about what you're doing, and they are going to give you useful feedback in like short bursts, because again, that is how people respond, right? That is how people text. It's a really normal thing to just here's some, you know, text back. So one of the things we tested, and I think is really important, like I said, spending on ads, right? Ads are really expensive. And so, you know, often now with like iOS changes and stuff like that, you know, more or more difficult to really, you know, narrow down and target. So you want to think about, what do you know about your SMS supporters? What does that translate to in ads? How do you use that to boost the effectiveness of some of these ads? So, and I can share the actual data on this test. It was very complicated and too much like stuff to put into just the slide here. But the experiment we ran in Hillary for America on how SMS audiences interacted with our ads, when folks received SMS messages from us, and we were fairly confident that they were also seeing our ads, the profit on those ads increased by 20 cents and cost us a sixth of a cent per text. So like that kind of ROI was incredible. It was the thing we could not duplicate in any other channel, right? SMS was the only channel that was able to do that. And it was really, really valuable. So it made our ad spend go much, much further in terms of, you know, return than anything else we could have done, while costing, I mean, practically nothing, right? 0.6 of a cent per message. So those treatment groups also had higher donations on average and a higher donation rate. So for very, very low cost for treatment, we were able to see really, really big results. And like I said, I'm happy to share that more detailed those more detailed experiment notes with folks if they are interested. So just some other best practices and thoughts. I have a lot of text on this slide, so I just want to kind of call out some specific ones. Think about when you're writing texts, right? Are you a person or are you a we, right? You are a singular person. If your copy has a lot of us's and we's, that's very confusing, right? Who am I talking to? Be a person, right? Be you, say I. You want to be for things. You don't want to give people you don't want to lead people down a road where they reply stop something, right? Again, having worked in immigration reform and immigrant rights, you don't want to lead people down a path where they reply like stop deportations, right? Because that will opt people out by accident. If they reply stop, that is going to opt them out. They're going to be very confused because they think they're doing what you want them to do. So why are you opting them out? They're not going to necessarily know how to opt back in unless your opt-out instructions, have something in there for them. So you want to lead people to ideally replying in some kind of affirmative, positive way, right? That is not always possible, but then you got to be really creative and making sure that people are not going to be responding in some of these ways that are going to have like adverse technical like back-end effects. So you really want to think about like, what is the average person going to do? How are they going to reply? Are we accounting for some of that? Just some other things that you want to think about. Don't skip sourcing your links way too often. I just got a text the other day from like a candle company that sent me a sale, right? And it didn't have any source links. So the link wasn't sourced. So like, how do you know that that's working, right? How do you know that you should spend your money on this? How do you know that these are people who are likely to answer your texts? Stuff like that. So you want to think about making sure your links are sourced. You don't want to change your sender constantly. You don't want to go too long in between messages. Like I said, that is really detrimental to building a relationship. So who is the one person they are talking to? Are they talking to them consistently? And then I really just want to impress on people, don't reuse graphics from other channels, right? If you made a graphic for Facebook or you made a graphic for Instagram, make a graphic for text. Make it the right size, make it so that it matches the size of the text window. It is very clear if you are using something from another channel and it's just like, here's a huge picture with tiny text, or here's a tiny picture with huge text. It doesn't match. Your supporters can smell the difference. If you're making those assets, just make one that is sized for SMS2. It's very easy and it's a big difference, right? It makes me feel like, great, they value this relationship, they did this for me, as opposed to just like, I am an afterthought, they took this from Twitter, why don't I just follow them on Twitter? Those are a bunch of best practices. I can give folks a couple more minutes to read some of those, and then we can move into some time for question and answers. So I know we have a bunch in the chat already, but I can give folks, Sunny, do you think I should give folks a couple of minutes to answer or to ask some?
Thanks, Lloyd. So I know we have a couple of questions already in the tab, so I'll go ahead and start there. I've got a few of my own for later if we, get to it in time-wise, but let's go ahead and start. So Sam asks, how do you respond to people who ask, how did you get my information?
This is a great question because they should know, right? If you are texting people and you have not gotten their permission, you should not be doing that, right? They should have given you permission and said, you can text me. If you are, like I said, this is a more expert class, so we didn't go over some of like the 10 DLC regulation changes and opt-in permission, stuff like that. But people should know how you got their information because they should have given it to you. If you bought their information, you should not be texting them. If you want to, email them and say, hey, sign up for our text, something like that, that's very different. But, people should know how you got their information because they should be the ones to give it to you. So you should only be texting people that have given you permission to text
All right. And Joe has two questions. The first one is, where does one get a list of people to text to?
So it's a great question. You have to build it, right? You have to, like I said, get permission from those people to text them. You cannot buy a list of phone numbers and just start texting people. You need to, think about those other channels you have, those other things at your disposal. How do you get people to say, yes, I want to get texts from you? Why am I signing up? Why am I getting these texts? So, that's emailing your list, that's doing social media acquisition, that's doing influencer outreach, that's doing in-person asks and stuff like that. That's doing video pre-roll, all kinds of things that you would do to build your email list or build your donor file, stuff like that. Those are all the same, and more tactics that you can use to grow your SMS list. But you have to build that list. You can't just go somewhere and get one.
All right. And Joe's second question, can text be done robotically or by a real person?
Oh, this is great. So ideally, it's both. It's a mixture, right? You should be doing automated things, right? You're setting up your broadcasts. You've got, keywords and replies and stuff like that happening automatically. Again, if you're collecting opt-in permission from folks and you're able to do A to P texting, where you're just kind of doing one to many, you press one button, it goes to, all million of your subscribers or however many. And then, you have humans in there looking for questions, answering things that are kind of off script, helping people who made mistakes, looking for some of that qualitative feedback, stuff like that. So, ideally, it is a mixture of human and robot. In some cases, it is human only. So you're doing, peer to peer as what we think of texting, where an agent is pressing a send button for every message and they're replying, ideally individually to people back. Or you're having, completely automated texting, your American Express, your, Delta, whoever are doing just like, here is your flight info, your flight is delayed, right? Completely automated. So, it is a spectrum. Everything is, on that spectrum somewhere. The best programs, I think, are both human and robot powered, right? Robot powered to help you scale, to help you do quizzes and other like automated engagement stuff, but has that personalized element. It comes from a real person. There's a human there that like I can identify, that I can talk to on, social media, something like that. So it's a mix.
All right. Thank you, Lloyd. And now Barrett asks, what text messaging technology do you recommend and why?
Yeah, it's another great question. So if we're talking about like technology in the sense of what platforms or stuff like that, right? I mean, prompt.io is a really powerful platform. It will let you do, like I said, all of those things on that spectrum between robot and human. If you mean like P2P or A to P or stuff like that, right? It really just depends on what is the goal of your program, right? What are the resources you have? What are the goals, that kind of stuff. And so it's just going to depend on like a particular use case. I will say that like texting platforms exist from like very, very cheap, bare bones. You can send out messages that have one message and that is it, and there's no replying and there's no, anything, all the way up to the Cadillac, of texting platforms that, integrate into everything and let you do, everything you want. And just without knowing more about like what do you want to do or what resources do you have or how important is this to your overall goals, stuff like that. It's just hard to say this is the platform I recommend, other than that prompt does everything we're talking about here and allows for that mix of automated and robotic, or excuse me, automated and personal.
Got it. All right. And Caitlin also has a question. I think she was replying to the answer from question one when we asked, how do you respond to people who ask, how did you get my information? So Caitlin asks, I feel that that answer sidesteps the campaigns which regularly text their whole voter file. Assuming that is something we're doing because everybody's doing it, how do we do so gracefully?
Yeah, I'm loath to give suggestions on how to do something wrong better. I would say I don't think you can go wrong being honest with people, right? We got your information from the voter file. It is publicly accessible information. People maybe don't like that, but it makes a lot more sense to those people then in the future when they say, you know, I've gotten 18 texts already, leave me alone, right? Well, I didn't text you. Everybody's getting the text from or getting your info from the same, location. Excuse me. I don't think you can go wrong being truthful with people, right? You want them to know you didn't go out and buy it. You didn't data scrape. You didn't, violate their privacy or their rights or anything like that. So if you have to, if you, are determined to do that, then I would say be honest with people, right? We got it from the voter file. If you need to change any info, here it is, right? It also answers a lot of people's questions when they're like, this isn't me. This hasn't been this person's phone number for 10 years. How do you keep getting this info? And lets them puts the power in their hands to figure out how to change it, how to update it, that kind of stuff. So my answer is just going to be, be honest with people. You got it from the voter file.
All right. And Rex asks, do you have any tips for turning members of your voter file into subscribers to other lists?
I'm not sure I understand, Rex. If you could expand a little bit, what do you mean into other lists?
All right, we'll wait for Rex there. This question from Ali. Do you have any tips for converting other lists into subscribers?
So is that like how to convert your email list, your email folks to SMS subscribers or your Instagram following, stuff like that?
Yeah,
So
she
I
said
would
yes.
say, okay, great. So then I would say, incentives work really well. So, hey, sign up and get this sticker or get this, um, button, whatever is a great way to do some easy list growth. Framing it as like a next step in activism. So, hey, do you care about this issue? This is the best way to take action, right? We will send you the most important updates or the easiest way to, call your legislator, stuff like that. So you want to think about like, again, what are you giving people? What is the reason they want to sign up? So is that they care about the activism? Is it, behind the scenes, this is how we do the cool stuff? Is it, talk to this policy person, right, and learn more about, what we're doing, that kind of thing. So you have to think about what do you have at your disposal? What do people care about from you? How do you turn that into like collateral in other channels for them to care about? But all of those other same principles apply, right? You still want to have, you know, interactive content. You want to have, your email having that clear ask, right? Here is what to do, here's why to do it, this is why it's important. So, still following all those things, it's an ask just like any other. It's just, instead of give us money or, find your hole in place or, whatever other ask is, it's join our SMS list. It might be, here's how to do rapid response for us. Here, you care about this thing, right? So you just have to think about like what's important to you, what's important to the supporters, and how do you give it to them.
Rex followed up on his question and said, so for instance, other likely voters and donors to other causes that they will likely be interested in.
Oh, okay. So again, I would ask people. A great example, I think, is Tim Kaine. Last time Tim Kaine ran for re-election, his canvassers, at the door asked people, out of these 4 issues, what's the top issue for you, right? So if I said climate change, like 2 days later, I got a text from the Tim Kaine campaign with a video of Tim Kaine talking about like his plans on climate change, right? So you can just ask people what they care about and then send them whatever relevant, info that is. If it is from another organization or something like that, if you're trying to like cross-pollinate organizations, sometimes it can be tougher. You might have to send people to a landing page to like get their consent again to message them from a different phone number. So you have to think about some of those regulatory things sometimes. But if it's just like, how do we find out what you care about? Like I said, you want to ask people. People will give you feedback. People will reply to your texts when you ask them things versus when you just say, click here to donate. because it's a very typical thing to do when you get a text from a friend or a family member, is to reply to it. So the more you lean into the medium, the more you think about this is how people use their phones, and they use their phones to text people. You can just ask them stuff and they will give you quite a bit of data and feedback.
All right, thank you, Lloyd. Ali asked another question. Should our organization do this in-house or hire a consultant? When is the right time to bring in help?
It's a really great question, right? As a consultant, I would always say, "Oh, bring me in," right? But it's not always the answer, right? It really depends, I think, on, are you dipping your toes in? Are you deciding out of the gate, this is going to be a really important channel to us because all of our competitors are in this channel and are doing things, right? I would say if you need to get from 0 to 100 very quickly, you want to bring in somebody that, here's how to get there very quickly, here's what we're doing, let's do all of this. We don't want to leave a lot to trial and error. If you're like, okay, we're going to devote, some budget to this year, we're going to do some testing and see what we can figure out, and then if it feels like this is worth it, then we want to bring somebody in, right? That might be a different approach if it's not something that you're um, feeling a lot of pressure to get moving on quickly, stuff like that. I would say a consultant a lot of times will help you figure out, this is the right technology for me, this is I need a short code versus I need a 10 DLC number versus a toll-free number, stuff like that. These are places I never would have thought in terms of like acquisition. So you can also bring in consultants for different steps of the process, right? I work with plenty of folks that I just help write RFPs and figure out what is the technology they're looking for, and then great, they're empowered and they go and they do it. I have other folks who I help them from soup to nuts, right? We start a program and then all along the process, here I am to help along. So um, I would say the biggest concern that I hear from most folks in terms of in-house is like, how much of a person's time is this, right? Do I need to hire a person for this, or like, is this somebody's part of their job? What department does it live in? That kind of stuff. Again, depending on what you're doing, how big your audience is, right? That kind of stuff. It doesn't have to be a full-time person's job. Again, it's not email. You're not sending a text every day. It's not social. You're not sending 8 texts a day. It can be, half, 35% of somebody's job if you're getting started. As you grow and as, the channel scales up and as you find some of those other creative uses for it, and as you're able to spread it through your organization or your campaign, maybe you do want to have a person in-house who's in meetings, who is advocating for SMS, or who's saying, oh, we've got this direct mail coming up. Where is the SMS integration? So a lot of it just depends on like your internal, goings on and priority and that kind of stuff. But I would say that like, for the most part in the space, consultants are really here to help you figure out, what is the technology you can use, right? What do we have at our disposal? What kind of technology is there? What are the main differences between them? How do we scale, right, is a big question. And then like training and best practices and kind of getting people to a point where they're doing some of this stuff instinctively, right? It does not take a PhD to write a text message. I will say that like very clearly, right? It is not something you need any kind of specialized training in. You write dozens and dozens and dozens of text messages a day in your personal life. The average person, right, sends something like 40, 60 texts a day. So you have plenty of experience in that already. It's about how to make it compelling for your audience, or how to think about it in some of these other channels, stuff like that. So, if a consultant tells you you need me because I write the best text messages in town, right? That's not real, right? No offense to anybody who's doing that, right? But like, that I don't think is the best use of a consultant or your consultant budget or something like that. Technology, the scaling, the training, that kind of stuff, I think is the best use of your budget for consultants, or human power in that sense. And if you are trying to make a successful program, that might be a great place to spend your money.
All right. And Tamil asks, what is the biggest pitfall in avoiding setting up SMS campaigns?
This is a great question. Waiting to get started, I would say. I talk to a lot of folks who are just like, well, we want to do this, but we're waiting for this big event we have as like a kickoff, right? Or we're waiting for our annual conference, right? And that's where we're gonna unveil it. Why, right? If you have decided you are going to be doing this, even if it's months down the line, even if it's not something that's like next quarter, start collecting opt-in permission, right? There's no reason not to start with that list. A lot of people don't collect that early, and then they are like, great, we're going to get started. We've got this technology, we're paying for all of this stuff now, but we don't have anybody that we're sending messages to. If you're spending, you know, $1,000 a month on a short code with nobody to actually text, right? You're wasting money. If you're spending, $2,000 a month on a platform to text 60 people, right? You're wasting money on that you didn't need to. You could have been collecting opt-in permission all along. And then when you're ready, you're just ready. It doesn't have to be a big ribbon cutting ceremony, right? It's just, here's a way we're going to talk to you the same way we talk to you in email and social and all these other channels. So I would say don't wait. If it's something you're thinking about or something that maybe in the future want to do, adding SMS opt-in to your forms doesn't depress conversion rate. I mean, I've been doing that test for 13 years now. It does not suppress any kind of conversion rates on your forms, on your donate forms, anything like that. So just start collecting opt-in, and then when you're ready, you have a list and you're able to get started and you're able to see, a lot bigger returns right out of the gate. It's just also less discouraging than, trying to start a list and you're sending to like 60 people. You're like, I made the best program and best experience. But if you're not, there yet in terms of subscribers, like who's seeing it?
Great. I think we have 2 minutes left for one last question. Andrew asks, how would you suggest integrating SMS with direct mail?
I would say thinking about, like I said, those primer and chaser and potentially sandwich tests. Are we sending texts before the direct mail piece drops? Do people look out for it? After it drops, hey, did you see this? Can you give? You also want to think about, is that moving? Are we giving people the option to move from offline to online donors? For my money, I would rather have direct mail donors move to online donors so I can stop sending them expensive direct mail pieces and I can stop, or I don't need to wait, only 3 times a year to ask them for money. If I move them onto a text list, I can ask them way more often. Thinking about that, making sure in your direct mail, hey, if you'd rather give online, here's a QR code, right? That opens up a text message with a donate link. Or, hey, do you have any questions about this, right? Text us at this phone number. So making sure that that's, on there as well. And those are just 2 really, really easy ways to really boost some of that direct mail without spending any additional money on the direct mail piece itself. So, you're already printing it, make sure it has that QR code on it. Great. You're already sending it. Great. Like I said, for, 0.6 of a cent, sending those primer messages ahead of time is going to really boost those response rates.
Great. And before I close things out, Lloyd, I think we had one last slide left for contact info.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. All right. So anyone who wants the presentation slides or anything can email Lloyd at the email right on the screen. Want to say a big thanks to prompt.io for sponsoring today's webinar. Even bigger thank you to Lloyd for leading today's session. And of course, we appreciate everyone for attending and hope to see you guys next time. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.